She didn't look up when he rode past the first time. Just sat there by the old stone well with her knees pulled close and her face pressed to them, as if the dust and wind and sun had all joined hands to keep her company, and failed. It was nearly evening when the rancher saw her again. Still there, same place, same stillness. A part of him wanted to keep riding. It was none of his business. The kind of man he used to be wouldn't have even slowed. But something about the way she wept, quiet like a habit, pulled at something he thought he'd buried long ago. He turned his horse around and rode back. The well hadn't drawn water in years. It sat like a tombstone now, the pump long broken, vines growing in cracks. But she sat close, like she was waiting for it to give her something. Or someone. The rancher dismounted, stepped slow so his boots wouldn't crunch too loud. "You all right, miss?" he asked, voice low. She didn't answer. He took a few more steps, stopped beside the well. She was small, 13, maybe 14, with dark hair twisted in uneven braids and feet covered in the red dust of the prairie. "Need help getting home?" Still nothing. So he lowered himself to one knee and asked softer, "Who you waitin' for?" That's when she looked up, and her eyes didn't match her face. Too deep, too knowing, like she'd seen every storm this land could throw and still chose to stay. She wiped her cheek and said the first thing all day, "My mama said if I wait right here, someone good would find me." The wind kicked up, the sky held its breath, and the rancher, who'd spent the better part of 20 years proving he wasn't good, felt something shift in his chest. He swallowed hard and sat down next to her. She didn't speak again for hours. Not when he asked her name. Not when he offered jerky from his saddlebag. Not even when he said the sun was dropping and wolves might be near. She just stared at the well like it might answer for her. So the rancher stopped asking. They sat there as the prairie turned gold, then orange, then blue. The shadows stretched long and soft, and the only sound was wind brushing across the dry grass. Finally, he stood. "Well, I can't leave you out here." She blinked, slow. He offered his hand. She didn't take it, but when he turned toward his horse, she stood and followed anyway. Didn't speak, didn't hesitate, just walked behind him like she'd known for years that he would come. The ride back was quiet. He didn't make her sit in front, just looped a lead line from his saddle horn to the reins of his old mare and let her ride behind him. Her hands held the saddle horn too tightly, knuckles white, but she didn't cry again, didn't flinch, just kept those deep, haunted eyes on the hills rolling by. "You got folks somewhere?" he asked once. She didn't answer, so he let it be. His ranch wasn't much. A 3-room house that leaned a little when the wind blew too hard. 2 barns, a chicken run, and a fence line that never seemed to stay fixed. But it was quiet, and it was safe. He helped her down from the horse and opened the door. "Ain't much, but it's warm." She stepped in like someone entering a church, looked around slow, touched nothing. He pointed to the old daybed near the hearth. "You can sleep there. I'll rustle some beans." She didn't sit, just stood there in the middle of the room, arms limp at her sides, and stared at the empty fireplace. He lit the lantern and got to cooking, glancing at her every so often. After a while, he said, "You hungry?" Still no answer. He didn't push it, set a plate down near her, took his own to the table. A few minutes passed before he heard the faintest scrape of her spoon. She slept like a stone, didn't move, didn't stir. And when he checked her in the middle of the night, just to make sure she was breathing, she had her arms folded across her chest like a body laid out for burial. The next morning, she was already awake when he came in from the barn, sitting by the window watching the horizon. He poured 2 cups of coffee, set one near her. "It's hot." She didn't drink it, didn't say anything until he was halfway through his eggs. Then, without turning from the window, she whispered, "My name is Ella." He set his fork down, let the silence stretch. "Ella's a good name." She nodded once as if she already knew. She didn't smile. Not once. Not that first week. Not when he let her name the chickens. Not when he built her a stool so she could help grind corn. But she worked, quietly, carefully. like someone who'd learned long ago that everything could be taken from her, and if she broke a thing, she wouldn't be allowed another. He started talking more. Not to her, just out loud. Telling stories she didn't ask for. Talking about the mule who used to bite him every Sunday. The coyote with only one ear. The day a storm blew his whole roof into the creek. She didn't laugh, but her eyes changed, softened. She started folding the blankets on the couch every morning before he came in. Started sweeping the porch without being asked. Started humming. Only a little. Only when she thought he wasn't listening. One night, after supper, she asked, "Was your mama kind?" He looked at her a long time. "No," he said finally, "but my sister was." She didn't ask more. Didn't need to. They sat in silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. Then came the day with the letter. A writer came up from town. Left a note. The rancher opened it by the fence, squinted hard. Then cursed low. Ella was in the barn, brushing the old mare. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Not for a long time. Then, "The county says I've got a ward." She frowned. "What's that?" "Means they found someone they say belongs to me. Blood. A nephew, maybe. Comes in on the noon train." Ella was quiet. Too quiet. Then, softly, "Will they take me away?" He turned fast. "No. Ain't nobody taking you anywhere. But if they say." I said no. It was the first time his voice rose, and the first time she didn't shrink from it. She just stood still, eyes locked with his. When the train arrived the next day, it wasn't a boy who stepped off. It was a woman, tired, dusty, holding the hand of a boy with a broken arm and no shoes. "You're Rhett Calder?" she asked. He nodded. She looked down. "They said we had nowhere else to go. You're the only kin left." Ella watched from the wagon, her hands tight in her lap. And Rhett stood there like a man being asked to catch lightning in his bare hands. He looked at the boy, then back at the girl in the wagon, then down the long road home. Finally, he nodded. "Well," he said, "let's go see about supper." The house felt smaller with four. Ella didn't say much, but Rhett could tell she watched everything. The woman, whose name was Lydia, took the smallest room in the back. Her boy, Micah, cried the first night, then the second. By the third, Rhett found Ella sitting outside the door, humming so soft it blended with the wind. Micah finally slept, and kept sleeping. Every night after that, Ella sat there. Didn't speak. Didn't knock. Just hummed her broken little tune until the boy stopped shaking. Rhett didn't know what to do with a house full of ghosts. Lydia was quiet and skittish as a doe. She moved through the house like it wasn't hers. Barely touched the food. Barely looked anyone in the eye. She cleaned obsessively. Rearranged things Rhett hadn't touched in years. Scrubbed floors that were already clean. And when he asked where she'd come from, all she said was, "East." He didn't push. But every time she looked at Ella, something flickered behind her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Micah was different. He took to Ella like a lost pup. Followed her around the yard. Sat beside her when she shelled beans or fed the chickens. She didn't speak to him at first, but she let him sit. And when he tripped in the barn and scraped his knee, she cleaned it without flinching. Didn't speak. Didn't soothe. Just did what needed doing. Micah looked up at her and said, "You ain't scared of blood?" She shook her head. He thought about that, then whispered, "I am." She didn't say it aloud, but something in her eyes answered. "So was I. Once." A week passed, then two, and Rhett started hearing laughter. Not loud, not often, but sometimes at dusk, when Ella and Micah tossed pebbles into the old well, or when Lydia bent to pick up a dropped spoon and Micah crawled under the table to chase her. It was like watching sunlight slip through cracks in a boarded-up window. Rhett didn't say a word, didn't want to scare it off. Then one morning, he came in from mending fence and found the kitchen silent. Too silent. Ella was gone. Lydia was gone. Micah stood by the door, eyes wide. "They left," he whispered. Rhett didn't ask who. He grabbed his rifle and saddled his horse before the kettle even cooled. They found the wagon 2 miles out. The horses still hitched, reins dragging. No blood, no tracks, just emptiness. And one small shoe, Ella's. Took him half a day to find them. The cave was hidden behind a bramble-thick ridge. One Rhett only knew because he'd hunted near it years ago. He almost missed the trail, but something told him to look again. He followed the faint drag of boots and the shimmer of torn cloth through brush and shale and shade. And then, deep inside the cave, he heard it. Breathing. Quick. Shallow. And then, crying. He raised the rifle, stepped inside, and saw a man. Big. Shirtless. Covered in old scars and new anger. Standing over Lydia, who was shielding Ella with her own body. Micah stood behind them, hands balled into fists, trembling. Rhett didn't wait, didn't speak, just fired. The cave echoed like thunder. The man fell, not dead, but still. Rhett stepped forward, rifle trained. Who is he? Lydia's voice was hoarse. My husband. Rhett stared at her. She looked away. I left him, took Micah. I didn't know he'd find me. I didn't think. Rhett's voice was gravel. He touch either of them? She shook her head fast. No, he found us. Started yelling. Said he'd take Micah. Said he'd kill you if I didn't come. Rhett looked at Ella. Her face was blank, but her hands were shaking. He lowered the rifle and said, no one's talking you. To Lydia, to Ella, to the cave itself, and to whatever old ghosts might still be listening. He didn't leave the man to die. Didn't kill him either. Just tied him with more rope than a steer and rode him to the marshal's office 2 towns over. When the marshal asked what happened, Rhett just said, found something ugly near a well I care about. The marshal didn't ask more. Didn't need to. Back at the ranch, things changed. Micah didn't cry at night anymore. Lydia didn't scrub the floor so much. And Ella started humming in daylight. She smiled once. Not big, not long, but Rhett saw it, and never forgot it. That night, Ella stood by the window, watched the stars, and whispered, you think my mama knew I'd find this? Rhett didn't answer right away. Then he stepped beside her, looked out at the same sky. I think your mama knew a lot. Ella nodded, didn't smile, didn't cry, just breathed, like it was the first time in years it didn't hurt to do so. That spring, the ranch changed. The land didn't, not really. Fence posts still leaned, the wind still came cold at night, and the well stayed as dry as ever. But there was something else. Something in the way footsteps sounded on the porch, in how the doors no longer creaked like morning things, in how the sun seemed slower to go down. Ella started wearing her hair loose. Micah chased chickens like they were ghosts to be caught. And Rhett, he started planting things. Not just feed corn or hardy oats, but things that needed care. Peas, wildflower seed, a single row of beans that Lydia watched like a prayer. He didn't say it out loud, but he found himself fixing things without thinking. The swing, the window latch, the cracked bench under the cottonwood. Things he used to ignore. One evening, Ella brought him a small wooden box. Didn't say a word, just handed it over like it was owed. Inside were 2 things. A locket, empty, and a sliver of ribbon with faded embroidery. He looked up at her. She shrugged. It's all I kept. From her. Ella nodded. I didn't want to forget, but it hurts when I remember. He looked at the ribbon, ran his thumb along the thread. That's what memory is. Both. She didn't answer, just sat beside him on the porch and watched the stars come out, one by one, as if each one needed to be seen. A letter came not long after, brought by a boy on a pale roan mule with one lazy eye. Rhett didn't get letters, hadn't since before the war, but this one was for Lydia. She turned pale when she saw the handwriting, went quiet as a stone. Later that night, she came to Rhett with the letter in her hand and her voice trembling. My father's sick, in Kansas. He sent for me. Rhett just looked at her. I don't know what to do, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Do you want to go? She looked at Micah, asleep by the fire, then at Ella, and then back at Rhett. I'm afraid, she said. Of him. She shook her head. Of leaving here. She left a week later. Didn't take the wagon, just a small pack and Micah clinging to her side. She promised she'd write. Rhett didn't ask her to. Didn't need to. Some goodbyes don't require a door to close. Some just happen when the dust lifts. Ella watched them ride off and said, without looking away, "They won't come back." Rhett swallowed hard. "No," he said. "I don't think they will." The house was quieter again. But it didn't feel empty. Not like before. Ella took to waking early. Feeding the stock. Cleaning stalls. She never complained. Never asked why the days were hard or why Rhett's leg ached more when the rain rolled in. She just did what needed doing. Rhett caught her once standing at the well. Looking into it. "There's nothing down there," he said gently. "I know." "Then why look?" She paused. Then, "Because once, I thought there was hope." He didn't argue. He just stood beside her and stared at the same dry stones and thought about how something broken could still be sacred. Weeks turned into months. And the ranch turned with them. The spring was generous. The hens laid fat eggs. The calf survived its breech birth. Even the mule quit limping. But one morning, Rhett found Ella staring at the horizon with something like fear in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stepped behind him. He turned and saw them, 3 riders, moving slow, deliberate, one in front with a hat too wide, one behind with a rifle low across his lap. The third was a woman, not Lydia, someone else. Rhett felt something cold settle in his bones. Ella whispered, "I know that man." He looked down. She was shaking again. They came to the gate and stopped. The man in front tipped his hat. "Name's Doyle. We're looking for a girl named Ella." Rhett stepped forward. "Ain't no one here by that name." Doyle smiled like a snake warming on a rock. "That so? 'Fraid it is." The woman behind Doyle didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared at Ella with dead eyes. Ella backed further behind Rhett. "I can pay," Doyle said. "I ain't a monster. I just want what's mine." "She ain't yours." "Blood says different." "Blood ain't ownership," Rhett said. "Not in this house." Doyle's smile faded. "That a threat?" "No, that's a fact." They left, slow, but not before Doyle leaned down from his horse and said, just loud enough for Ella to hear, "You can't hide forever. Not from what you are." Rhett didn't flinch, didn't say a word until the dust settled. Then he turned to Ella. What did he mean? She was pale, breathing hard. "He's my uncle," she said finally. "And that woman, that's his sister. My mother's sister." Rhett didn't say a word. Didn't have to. She looked up at him with those deep old eyes and said, "They gave me away, Rhett. Not because they couldn't keep me, but because they didn't want to." He crouched beside her, took her hands in his. "Well, they can't have you back." That night, he oiled the rifle and sat on the porch. Didn't sleep. Didn't need to. Ella sat beside him before sunrise and said, "If you tell me to run, I will." Rhett shook his head. "Not this time. This time we don't run." And the sky broke wide open with light. The letter came back unopened. Lydia never wrote. The girl Rhett had watched braid her hair beneath the cottonwood. The one who sang to her brother when the coyotes howled too close. She was gone now. Whether she'd meant to or not, she'd left something behind in the rancher's chest. Something like an ache that never quite turned to pain. But he didn't speak of it. Not to Ella. Not to the land. The ranch had a way of swallowing silence like seed. And sometimes it even bloomed. Ella grew tall fast. Her shoulders straightened. Her voice sharpened. Her steps took on the rhythm of someone who knew where she was going, even when she didn't. She learned the weight of a bucket, the sting of lye soap in cracked knuckles, the whisper of grass before a storm. She never asked Rhett why he stayed. She only ever asked if he'd teach her to shoot. He did. One morning, long after the scare with Doyle and the sister with no name, Rhett took her out to the West Ridge. The sky was clean, bright, clouds scattered like sheep in a pasture too wide to fence. He handed her a rifle. "You're ready." She looked up at him, then back at the paper target nailed to the stump. "I'm scared." "Good," he said. Means you respect it. She didn't speak again, just squared her shoulders and took the shot. The sound echoed like thunder. She missed. Rhett didn't flinch, just nodded. Again. She got better. Fast. Rabbits. Coyotes. Even a buzzard too bold for its own good. But he saw something deeper growing in her, the kind of readiness that didn't come from practice but from something older. Something passed down like a story no one wanted to admit was true. She didn't just want to survive. She wanted to stand. Then came June. Hot. Relentless. The kind of heat that strips color from the world. The creek dried up. 2 chickens died. A snake got into the barn and curled up inside the feed barrel like a king. But what worried Rhett more was the rider spotted by Ella near the old fence line. One man. Too far to see clearly. But watching. Doyle? He asked. Ella shook her head. Didn't feel like him. He didn't like that answer. Didn't like what it meant. That night they didn't light the lamps. He kept the rifle close. She kept the revolver beneath her pillow. They didn't speak much. Just listened. To wind. To hooves. To the silence between. And just before dawn, the first shot came through the window. It shattered glass and the morning. Rhett rolled to cover, pulled Ella down. A voice shouted outside, thin, woman's voice. You're harboring a stolen child. Rhett peeked through the crack in the door. 2 of them this time. Not Doyle. Not the woman. New strangers. But their cruelty was the same. He could smell it. Ella loaded quietly beside him. You stay low, he said. No. Ella. She looked at him, face calm, voice steady. I'm not hiding anymore. The next moments unfolded like a bad memory. They returned fire. Rhett took a graze to the shoulder. Ella a burn across the forearm from a splintering board. But they didn't stop. Didn't waver. Rhett dropped the first man with a shot clean through the leg. The second ran. He could have chased. But Ella didn't. She just stood in the doorway, watching the blood soak into the earth. Then she whispered, It's over. Rhett wasn't sure. But she was. They buried the one man by the east fence. Marked it with a rock and no name. Ella didn't cry. Rhett did, but only when she wasn't looking. Weeks passed. And no one came. The land quieted. The hens laid again. The well, though still dry, didn't feel empty anymore. Felt still. Settled. Rhett and Ella rebuilt the window. Together. No glass this time. Just a canvas flap tied down with old leather straps. Let the air in. Let the world out. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills like it always did, Rhett sat on the porch with a book he never quite got around to reading. Ella came and sat beside him. Didn't say anything. Just leaned her head on his arm. He looked out at the pasture, then down at her, and finally asked, You still waitin' by that well? She shook her head slowly. I ain't waitin' anymore. He nodded, then closed the book, set it down. And together they watched the last of the light fade into a sky too wide to hold it all.